This is Under the Influence, a show about coercive control. Please be aware that this show covers subjects some may find distressing.
Thank you for joining us today. Today I'm talking to Chris Shelton, MSc, former Scientologist, current activist, author, and academic. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
You're very welcome.
Can you tell us what is the Sea Organization and what was your life like in it?
Sure. So the Sea Organization is Scientology's sort of inner core group. Maybe you might think of it as the equivalent of the Vatican for the Catholic Church. Like it's the central body that manages Scientology, makes all the big decisions, disseminates Scientology, produces its major promotional materials and promotional campaigns. And it was something I was part of for 17 years of my life, up until 2012 when I left. And my experience in that was pretty rough and tumble. It's a pretty rough and tumble, hardcore group of people. It's paramilitary, so you have uniforms and ranks and ratings and yes, sir, and no, sir, and how high, sir, and all that kind of spirit and attitude. It goes all around the Sea Org. They take themselves very, very seriously. And in a more, reductionist or tongue-in-cheek way, I might say the Sea Org are sort of the most fanatical Scientologists. They are 24/7. All they do is work on Scientology all day, every day.
Wow, that sounds quite intense.
It was. It is hard to describe how intense life is in the Sea Org. It's not like anything I've experienced in the 10 years since I've been out of that group. There's nothing else that even comes close.
Do you get days off while you were in the Sea Org?
Well, the last 5 years I was in the Sea Org, I had 5 days off. So sure, there are days off, but they are very few and far between. The policy on days off and time off in the Sea Org, or what they call liberties, they use a lot of naval and military terminology. And the policy is you get a day off once every 2 weeks if you ask for it and if your production is up this week versus how it's measured from last week. So you have to be producing more this week than last week. And generally you have to be producing more, on a week to week basis in order to be somebody who gets regular time off. Very, very few people are in the Sea Org taking much time off.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Sea Org contract is a contract of commitment of 1 billion years with a B, billion. And I try to explain to people this is kind of a symbolic thing. We took it literally. It's you really, when you believe in past lives, that means you also believe in, of course, future lives, that you're going to continue on and that you can't die. And so the idea with the Sea Org, and this is really one of the big reasons I say these people are fanatical, is because you're signing over your next, million lives or something? To the cause. And I'm that dedicated to Scientology. And I was, when I was 25 years old, I had no idea what the world was really all about. And I thought this was the right thing to do. So I did it.
I'm a little bit speechless right now.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, isn't it? It's really quite something. Destructive cults and extreme beliefs can drive people to do things that make no sense whatsoever. But in the moment that you're in it, and especially for somebody like me, and there's a lot of us who we refer to as second generation cult members, you don't have a life or really a reality outside of that paradigm you're given. And I was, so I was raised a Scientologist. I really thought L. Ron Hubbard was a genius. I thought he was a philosopher and researcher and discoverer. And I thought that this was the truth. And this is how the world actually is. And that we are all spiritual entities. And, these thetans, that's what they call them in Scientology, thetan. It's not a coincidence. It rhymes with Satan, but we don't have to go there today. And I thought that was reality. And you can kind of enmesh yourself in a different reality. And then everything looks a little different. Black is white, red is green. It's the world looks different than what normal, regular folks would think of it as. And so 1 billion years is like, well, according to Scientology teachings, I've been around as a living entity for billions and billions, even trillions of years. So, what's another billion? I mean, it's kind of that kind of thinking. It's really nuts.
What is the rehabilitation project force, and what were your experiences whilst on it?
The RPF, or the Rehabilitation Project Force, was a disciplinary and rehabilitation program for offenders in the Sea Organization. It's not something that regular public Scientologists or even city level staff members like the Church of Scientology of London, that's not Sea Org. They don't do this. But in the Sea Organization, you have a full-time sequestered program where you are found guilty because of the fact that you have been found guilty of crimes, as dictated by Scientology's policies, not by the legal system. Scientology has its own internal justice system. And the RPF was designed to give somebody in the Sea Org a chance to redeem themselves rather than getting kicked out. And this was a brainchild of Hubbard back in the 1970s. About 1974 is when it started. And this is when they were out sailing around on the oceans, and they were out on boats. And so the program consisted of, and when I did it, still consisted of a lot of hard physical labor. The idea is that you are supposed to be working for your rehabilitation. And so, chipping paint and doing, sanding the deck and doing very grueling, very hard work. The kind of work we did was retarring the roofs of buildings and sandblasting the side of the complex, and grounds work and carpentry work and really hard stuff. That constitutes the bulk of your day when you're on the RPF. And then there's 5 hours of that day where you and another person who are on the RPF program are twinned together. You work together, and you're kind of responsible for each other. And the idea is, the motto of the RPF is not, did you get better? It's, did you make somebody else better? And the idea is that you're supposed to apply Scientology auditing and ethics techniques or methods to them. And there's a lot to this. We don't have the time to go into all the details of this. But the idea is, you're working on them, they're working on you, and you're going back and forth, and you have this 5-hour slot where you do what's called auditing or security checking. And you're basically doing a sort of an enforced interrogation where you have a preset list of questions or forms of questions that you ask. And this covers every aspect of your life. Everything. Your most intimate private moments and everything you've ever done are put under a microscope. And the idea in Scientology is that if you have committed sins or wrongdoings, that is the reason why you have screwed up and committed the crimes or did the bad deeds or gotten yourself on the RPF in the first place. It's your fault. And so you're there to redeem somebody else, and they're there to redeem you. And you work on each other doing this confessional procedure. And this is again, it's kind of an involved technical thing, but the bottom line is you're getting them to confess all of their sins to you, one question at a time. And because of the way Scientology works, it should be noted that this involves past lives. Scientology does not just deal in your current lifetime actions. And on the RPF specifically, and in certain kinds of auditing, they're very interested in you going way back in time. And so you are looking for root evil intentions that you're carrying around with you. This is all Hubbard's, hokum, but this is the idea, is you're trying to find the root evil cause within you as to why it is that you are doing bad things. And it's not just one evil intention. On the RPF program, you're going to pull hundreds of them. And so it's quite a grueling process. I was on it for 3 years. That's a pretty average time. There were some people who were on it for as long as 10 years, which is utterly monstrous. It's insane that somebody would be doing something like this for that long. But that was the program. And the idea is you go in there and you get roto-rootered and you sort of confess all your sins and have to read all of this Hubbard writing about ethics and what's good behavior and bad behavior and that sort of thing. And at the end of it, you're a good little Sea Org member again. And it's quite the program. And you know, physical beatings and physical torment are kind of routine on that program. I'm sort of giving you the sort of lightest possible explanation for it. It's a rigorously abusive program. It's not, I've compared it, and I don't think I'm off in saying this. I've compared it with Chinese or North Korean re-education camps. It's that kind of level of torment and trauma that you're experiencing when you're doing this program. There's constant yelling and screaming. You have to run everywhere. There's no such thing as a day off. That you can forget that. Every single day is exactly the same as every other day. There's no holidays. It's 20 minutes for lunch, 20 minutes for dinner. You have a very slotted 7.5 hours to sleep, and that's it. And you're supposed to, you know, just kind of perform at peak performance the rest of the time. And you're not allowed, when you're on the RPF, to talk to anybody else outside of the program. They have to talk to you first. And you're sequestered away from everybody else. So I and many other people on the RPF were married, and you don't get to see your spouse while you're on that at all. There's no contact, no communication except by letter. And all your letters and all your communications are filtered through the person who is running the program, who is not himself on the program. This is a person who oversees it. And if anybody is trying to send you communications that they don't like, or you're trying to say anything negative or real or true about what you're experiencing, that's censored. So and you're never allowed to have more than about $5 or $10 on you at a time. They take your ID, they take your passport. There's you know, if you leave or escape, you're broke. You don't even have an ID or a driver's license or anything. So there's a lot of reasons to sort of stay in that and be stuck in that. And it's a voluntary program in that you literally sign legal contracts saying, yes, I'm doing this of my own accord, but it's a little bit under duress, because if you don't do it, you're going to lose your wife, your family, your friends, you know, all your relationships. They're just gone. So it's kind of devil in the deep blue sea kind of a choice. And that was the position I was in when I did it back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So that's the shortest answer I can give you for what the RPF is.
How do people get out of the RPF? Is there like someone deciding that they've done enough, they've been in there enough years, or is it something more personal? Or
Oh, no, it's a program of actions. And so what you have to do is you have to go through the entire program to completion. There are various steps, various check boxes you have to check off. All of the forms of the interrogations that you're receiving, those are pre-printed. They're not inventing the questions. They're all written down for them. You can ask additional questions, but you have to do all of these forms. And the form that we did was something on the order of about 200 or 300 questions. And these questions can take days, weeks to get through. Just one question, because it's not just a matter of pulling down one sin or transgression. Then the question is checked again. And they use this device, this electronic device called an e-meter or electropsychometer. And this is supposedly reading your thoughts and reading your trauma. It's not. But that's what Scientologists think it's doing. And so you have to verify on this e-meter that the question is actually taken to a full completion. And until it is, you're not done with it. And so you go through this whole series of steps. There are other technical actions that get done as well, but that's the basic idea. And once you finish all of that and have shown restitution, have shown that you're productive, you can't slack off. There's no walking around. There's no, resisting the program. Once you're there, you're expected to have your nose to the grindstone and get yourself through it. And it's a years-long program. So you really got to be determined to get through it. probably 60 to 70% of the people, rough guess, don't make it through. They end up, I'm quitting, I'm done, I'm out, and they leave Scientology and they're done. And good on them. That was the right choice. I was the idiot. I stayed and got through it because I was a very dedicated, hardcore, Scientologist. I'd grown up with Scientology. I didn't see the world the same way people in the world see it. And so I thought this was the only path to my own spiritual redemption. And I was going to tough it out and I was going to get through it. So that's how it goes. And once you finish all the questions, it's not like you're done. There's a whole package, a whole box, literally, of paperwork that has to get done to prove that you have completed all of this. And that goes to about 5 different people who have to sign off on it. Then you're done.
Wow.
Yeah, it's extensive. And they've said now that they have canceled the RPF, that it no longer exists in Scientology. I'm not so sure about that. Probably true. But all the tools and all the methods and all the evil intention stuff and all of that, that's still there. They still use all that. So, you can cancel it, but really, did you? Or are you just saying you did because you don't want the bad press? I think it's more like that.
How did you get out in the end?
Well, the path out of the Sea Org or out of Scientology is usually a kind of long one for people. For me, it was a bit of a 10-year journey of doubts and reservations and concerns and problems that sort of built one on top of another on top of another. There's various, what I call break points where you have emotional or moral conflict or dilemmas and you're like trying to figure it out. And then you reconcile it somehow, or you kind of make something make sense, like you're watching somebody beat on somebody else and you're thinking, well, this isn't what it says to do, but here's this awful trauma thing happening, the traumatic episode that I'm observing, or I'm being beaten on, or I'm seeing people's families being ripped apart, or I'm seeing crimes being committed. And you can only justify that kind of thing for so long. And most people have a breaking point. Everybody's really got a breaking point at some point. So mine came in 2012 when I realized, actually, I think it was back 2011 when I realized that I was spending more of my time as a Sea Org member and as a Scientologist telling lies to people to get them to come back in. I was recovering people and finding people who had sort of strayed away from the path, and I was going and knocking on their door and saying, hi, I'm here to get you back, and I was doing that kind of work. And I was having to lie to people, and I didn't sign on to lie to people. That wasn't my thing. And so I thought, wait a minute, something's really, really wrong here. And the more I looked, the more it became clear that I was involved in something that was really very not constructive. It was actually destructive to a lot of people. And I then decided, well, I need to leave the Sea Org. And I stopped working for the Sea Org. That took like 9 months for them to kind of let me go. Because I still thought that Scientology as a body of knowledge was true. I just thought the Sea Org and the organization was a little off the rails. And so I thought, well, I still want to practice the religious, spiritual aspects of this. I just don't want to be part of this abusive organization anymore. And then I learned a great deal more about Scientology once I had full access to the internet. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention, you don't have access to the internet when you're in Scientology. I didn't in the Sea Org. They've opened it up a little bit, but it's very filtered. It's very controlled. And so I didn't have that access. So once I got out and I got into the real world where nobody could stop me, I went down the internet rabbit hole of Scientology, and I was amazed and horrified at what I learned. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea. And that's what really fully opened my eyes to it, and that was about spring, summer 2013 when I really was fully out.
How has your life been after you've left? How's your recovery been?
Oh, it's been wonderful. It's been great. I mean, it's been a lot of ups and downs. Recovery from a destructive cult, especially when you're a second generation member, is never an easy thing. There's a lot you have to go through. Some people choose to kind of embrace that and really go for it. Other people, kind of live in denial for quite a while, don't want to have to deal with it. There's the whole 5 stages of acceptance and grief and all of that, where people deny and then they get angry and then they kind of, get apathetic, and then they, finally come to a place where they can accept what's happened. And it can take a while for people to go through that. For me, it was quite a tumultuous journey emotionally and sort of psychologically. I immersed myself in an awful lot of education. I really studied psychology and sociology and kind of what happened to me. Why did this happen to me? Why does this happen to people? Why do people let this happen to themselves? Why put up with this kind of abuse? And in doing that, I came to learn an awful lot, not just about cults, but domestic abuse and violence and gangs and, human trafficking even. I mean, there's a lot of abusive stuff that happens in the world, and these cults are part of that. And so I wanted to learn all about it so I could not only make sure I never fell for that nonsense again, but I could help other people recover and not fall for that in the first place. And that's kind of been my own personal mission. Not every ex-member does that, but that's been my journey. And so there's been a lot of ups and downs, but it's all been a progression upwards. It's like, yeah, you go down, you have your down days, your depressive episodes, but then, you're more honest with yourself, you're more reflective, you're more real. And there's a willingness, at least on my part, to want to face the truth of something. I don't want convenient lies in my life anymore. I want the truth. And that's kind of what my journey has been propelled by, is a search for and kind of seeking out the truth. And that's what's been fun. That's what's been amazing. And has introduced me to some of the smartest, most amazing people along the way who have helped me in this. So that's kind of a summation of it.
Can you tell us, I know you've already mentioned this a little bit about this earlier. Can you tell us about your studies and your academic work, as well as about the UK's new coercive control / undue influence law?
Sure, yeah. It was about 2 years ago, I got involved with a master's program at the University of Salford. It's a unique program that offers a master's degree in the psychology of coercive control. It's a very, specific look at psychology in terms of domestic violence, in terms of cults, gangs, like I talked about there. And it's very comprehensive. You really break down what is coercive control, what's abuse, what are predators, what's this all about? We didn't get into psychological labels so much as behavior, and looking at why that behavior happens and how it's informed by belief or by predatory people who are sort of imposing their worldview on others. And this is all around us. There's, it's not just something that is only confined to cultic situations. We see this in politics. We see this in social media. We see this in religion. We even see this in sports. I mean, it's kind of all over. When you have a sort of a weird kind of a codependent relationship between a leader and followers, and you get this whole paradigm going. So most of my education on that program in Manchester was focused around those concepts, and historically, in present time, breaking it down. How do you treat this therapeutically? It wasn't a program that taught me to be a therapist, but I do now know more about the treatment modalities of how you deal with people who have come out of these traumatic situations, and how do you help them to recover from that. That was part of the program. And it was a very, very cathartic part of the program for me personally, of course. And then I got to do original research as an academic on the topic of coercive control. And in fact, the subject of my research paper was the confessional procedures that were used in the RPF. and that are used outside the RPF too within the Scientology world. Their confessional procedure is very, very common and very used because it's very coercive and very, it controls people. If you have access to a person's private life and intimate details to the degree that Scientology does, where they not only know your secrets, they've written them all down and keep them in folders. And there's lots of folders. They have warehouses of these things. You have a lot of control over people because they don't want that information being publicly accessed. And that's one of the ways Scientology will sort of ruthlessly keep people in, is they will emotionally or psychologically blackmail them with this. So, and it's a covert sort of thing. It's all sort of cultural. They don't have to sit and tell you, we're going to tell all your secrets. They don't have to be that blunt about it. It's just kind of this understood thing, and you have to kind of overcome that to get out of there. So that was a lot of what we learned about on that program. And so my research all focused on how that works. And it was great. It was very clarifying and, again, cathartic for me doing that program.
Can you tell us a bit about the UK's new coercive control and undue influence law?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was part of the program, was we got to study the 2016 laws in the UK about coercive control. And what a refreshing thing to see a government or a legislature take this seriously, because in the United States, this has not really yet hit the books here. And I really, really want it to, because this is something that needs to be codified into law. Coercive control is a repeating pattern of behavior. It's not a one-off thing. When you're coercively controlling somebody, you are controlling their relationships, their bank accounts, their life. And that is not something that you just have happen in one 5-minute or 10-minute episode. And that's now in the law on the books there. And this was mainly and has mainly been manifested or used in the UK so far in the domestic violence realm. It's really a law that's tailored to help people who are trying to escape from a domestic situation. And yet the same principles apply to cult and gang situations too. And we hope to see an expansion of these ideas where they can be used to show that certain groups or cult leaders or high control groups utilize these exact same principles that domestic abusers utilize to control their spouses. So that's kind of what's on the books there now in the UK. It's a very recent thing. And you find in learning about this that there's the law as written, and then there's the application of the law and how it actually comes into play and is utilized by prosecutors. And so we haven't had a lot of test cases or uses of this yet. It's really only been utilized in a handful of circumstances, but we're hoping to see more of this as time goes on.
That sounds good. That sounds quite positive. Can you tell us about your book, From A to Xenu? Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes, Scientology A to Xenu. I tried to kind of that title was suggested to me. I wish I had come up with that myself. It's a really great name for my book, though, because I wrote something that is a little different from what most ex-members do. Most people tell their story. They write a memoir. My book is a critical analysis of Scientology. It's my story is just chapter 1, just to kind of establish for the reader who I am and what I've experienced as a Scientologist growing up and doing the whole Sea Org thing. But the rest of the book is a breakdown of the beliefs, who L. Ron Hubbard, the founder, was, what he was about, what motivated him, their relationship with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service here in the United States, because they, as an organization, they had tax exempt status for many, many years. Then they lost it, and then they got it back. And a lot of people wondered how that happened. So I broke that whole thing down, because tax exemption in the United States is very important. The Church of Scientology does not have that status in the UK because they cannot pass any test for public good. Because they don't operate for the public good. It really is a money-making scam. Mm-hmm. And so the book kind of breaks all this down. And then the last 3 chapters of the book have to do with cult recovery And that was actually still pretty early in my journey, but I still look back and am quite happy with what I wrote there as far as getting over a destructive cult and its influence on you. So that's all encapsulated in that one book.
Are you going to write more books?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I have about 3 or 4 more that I've got on my mind right now that I'm dying to write. It's really just a matter of finding the time to do it. It's difficult when I have a production schedule like I have, but they're there. They're coming.
That's all the questions we have for you today. Thank you for joining us so much, Chris.
You bet. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.